Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's class on new trends in supply chain management. This is a lecture that I particularly find extremely interesting, and I hope you find it interesting as well. So, as we know, there are a lot of upcoming trends in supply chain management. There are new technologies. We're just in such an exciting phase right now where there's, new things that we hear about, such as 3D, additive manufacturing, robotics, augmented reality, and the list goes on. It's a rather large, long list. And the interesting thing is that we're living in a world where there's so much of change and it's coming at such a fast pace. And so in this particular lecture, what I've attempted to do is identify the key new trends that are happening in supply chain management. And should give you a good overview of what are the big trends that are in the pipeline and what are the upcoming trends in supply chain management. And so hopefully in the future, when you're working in a company, you would have a fair understanding of exactly what's going on as far as new trends in supply chain management. And hopefully you can perhaps help and add value to the companies that you're working for in terms of different things that they can bring into their organization to further help them and increase their profitability. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to get into the first new trend. And the new trend that I'm going to start off the lecture is regarding smart cities. Now, this is an offshoot of the last lecture that we had on supply chain digitalization and technology. And during that lecture, I spoke a little bit, well, quite a bit about IoT and the Internet of Things. And so just to follow up to that, as I had mentioned in the previous lecture, there are several smart objects now in the world. The number is growing exponentially, and objects are becoming smart by virtue of having chips embedded in them, and those chips have the ability to store information, and they're smart. So information is processed. So if for example, if a chip is in a box and that box is carrying certain goods from one place to another, the temperature can be controlled remotely. You can get information on the amount of light that's that's entering the box, and you can alter these kind of things through these metrics through an app. So there are lots and lots of IoT products that are coming out, and a lot of these products are being used in households by consumers, in companies, but more interestingly, these are also being used in cities, so on large infrastructure projects. And the whole idea of cities has been changing a lot, cities as we know it. So if we look at what's going on a high level, there is a trend of urbanization. So a lot of people that were previously living in villages are moving to cities. And so the interesting statistic that I have for you to share with you is that by 2050, 7 people out of 10, 7 people, so 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. So even if you look at a city like Karachi, there are people that are coming from villages and on a regular basis, and you see them sometimes because they start off in a very humble way, and they look for, those are usually the daily wage workers looking for some sort of employment. And the reason that a lot of people move from villages and have been moving from villages to cities is that they are promised a better lifestyle overall as compared to living in villages. So this is a very big trend. Now, what's happening is that, as I mentioned in my earlier lectures on globalization, the world population is increasing. It's doubling every 40 years or so. So that's a lot of people. And the general average life expectancy is also going up. So there's a lot of, there are a lot more people and fewer resources to share. amongst those people. But in addition to that, what's happening is that cities are becoming very crowded. Currently, there are 23 very large mega cities in the world, but these mega cities and the infrastructure in these mega cities is beginning to get really slammed, and there's a lot of load on the infrastructure. And so what's going to be happening and what is beginning to happen is that cities are becoming smart cities. And what's happening is, what I mean by that is that there are, a lot of infrastructure with where, chips are being put in a lot of infrastructure, for example, in bridges and in traffic lights and, throughout the city. And basically the idea is to gather information and to also be able to alter various infrastructure remotely. So for example, traffic lights can be controlled remotely. Lights around the city that are turned on at night can be, switched on and off. And so there's a lot of things that are beginning to be managed remotely in smart cities. Now, there are a lot of benefits of having a smart city. Number one is you just get a lot of information. So if, for example, you have your traffic light is a smart traffic light, and there's a chip embedded in the traffic light, you can easily be able to tell exactly how many people sort of travel on the road, what are the peak traffic times, what are the times when there's nobody on the street usually. So there's this way you're gathering a lot of information. And once you get that information, once you get that data, basically you can analyze it and extract some very valuable information. And so that's big data right there for you. But additionally, what can happen is that all the resources that a city has to share amongst its citizens can be handled in a smarter way. So things such as water distribution and water management, and we see that in Karachi there's usually a water shortage, and it's a perpetual water shortage. And some of the reasons are there's just a lot of wastage and there's a mafia and all of these different things going on. Well, if you have a smart water management system, you can sort of avert the corruption going on, and you can make sure that the water is being managed in a more efficient way, and you can track it and distribute it accordingly. Also, energy. So the way electricity is being distributed, it can be managed in a much smarter way. There's a lot of wastage, whether we're talking about electricity or water, and so there's a lot of wastage. And once you have smart systems in place, that wastage is eliminated. There are also, again, in transportation systems, there are so many times where there's huge traffic jams, and with with this trend of urbanization and the population growth, you see that there's a lot of stress on on the roads. There are just so many people traveling at the same time. So if you have smart transportation systems, you can manage the traffic a lot better as well. And then food management. So you see some places there's a lot of wastage of food, and other people are going hungry. So again, by smart food management, you can avoid such situations. And so this whole concept of smart cities is something that is going to pick up and become even more popular as time progresses. All right. So, oh, and just one other thing I do want to mention: in order for any city to become a smart city, the first thing and one of the most important things is that you need to have Wi-Fi, and that's very important because these chips, obviously, in order to collect the information, all of that. So many smart cities now have very large areas where they give free Wi-Fi. And the reason partially is because, they are developing smart cities. One last thing I do want to say regarding smart cities is that with all of these benefits, there is, of course, the drawback of, any systems that use Internet of Things, which is that the smart objects can be hacked. And so obviously there is that sort of a security risk involved. That being said, most mega cities are still just have decided to move towards developing smart cities, and they are, taking on that risk. All right, so that was the first trend, and I hope you found that interesting. The next one is something else that is up and coming, which is autonomous trucks and vehicles. And another word for this is, self-driving trucks and vehicles. So what does this exactly mean? Well, in this particular slide, you can see there's this, a truck, and there's no driver inside, and it is a moving vehicle. So basically, these are trucks and other vehicles that can operate with minimal or no human interaction. Now, the level of automation, so there are different, either it could be a car that, is completely functioning on its own, but there are nowadays cars that are, so there are different levels. So, if you're at a, let's say, level 2, there may be a combined function automation, which basically means the driver will be doing some functions and there'll be some functions that will be being done automatically. But then if you're in a full self-driving automation level 4 vehicle, then everything is going to be being done by the vehicle itself. So what's the status? What's happening? Have these been launched or not? Let's look a little bit into that. What's happened is that the first autonomous delivery that was made by an autonomous truck was made in October 2016. So these vehicles are operational, and they are, they are definitely in the market. They are rather, they do require, making these kind of automobiles do require a lot of investment, and there's a lot of testing going on these vehicles. So, various companies such as Tesla are making, these kind of cars, but they are testing them at length because, for safety and security reasons. So most probably, in the next 5 years or so, you're probably not going to be seeing self-driving trucks and vehicles, in the market, in, your supply chains. But perhaps, 5+ years down the road, they may become more common. The benefit of these cars, usually these, trucks are going to be used for long distances, where, they're big sort of highways and they can just go straight down the highway. And because the speed is going to be controlled remotely, this will result in lower fuel costs, and it will also be very beneficial because there will be, as a result of having these kind of cars accessible and running regularly. I mean, again, you don't have a driver, so these cars could run for several hours without a break. The benefit it will be that you won't have to have as many warehouses, you won't have to have as many distribution centers, and you won't have to stock up as many things. As soon as things are ready, you can just shoot them off through these trucks. And so that's great, right? From a supply chain point of view, if your inventory levels are going down and you have less distribution centers. So it's a cost, there's a big cost advantage to having autonomous vehicles. But if you look at it from another point of view, there will be a lot of job losses in the trucking sector, because there will no longer be a need for that many drivers. So, with all the pluses, there are so many times some minuses with these new trends. All right, now I'll be moving on to the next trend, which is robotics. And this is basically, what are robots? Robots are machines that can be used to do jobs, and you can automate, certain tasks partially or completely. And so, tasks, mundane tasks, boring tasks, or dangerous tasks that were previously, done by employees can be automated, and robots can be used to do them. Now, if you look at the history, the first robot was invented in 1961, and the industrial robot, I mean, and the robot was focused on manufacturing. Subsequently, we heard that Amazon started using a lot of robots in their warehouses, and these were called Kiva. So they bought the Kiva robots or the Kiva system in 2013, and so they ended up bringing in about 30,000 different robots in 13 of their warehouses, which is a pretty large number of robots. And then, there are other places where robots have been being used, for example, in farms and orchards to pick fruit, and so to make deliveries. So there are just a whole lot of different ways people, companies and factories are using robots. And so that's something that, again, this is something that it's not really happening on a grand scale right now. Especially in a country like Pakistan, you do see automation, but you don't necessarily see robots running around on the factory. So that's not really happened. And not only in Pakistan, even in first world countries, you don't really see that happening very often. People are dabbling and trying to see whether they can bring in a little bit of robots and to their factory environment and what kind of impact that's going to have. But it's not very prevalent right now. If and when in the future this does happen, though, and robots become more common in factories, the result is what's going to happen is that the overall efficiency of factories or manufacturing will increase, and there'll be probably fewer people doing very dangerous, repetitive, tedious tasks. Those will be given to robots to do. And definitely, if robots are doing it versus employees and humans, there's going to be a higher level of quality, more accuracy and precision. But on the other hand, there's going to be less flexibility, because robots can't necessarily, I mean, this is not exactly artificial intelligence. Yes, there are certain robots that have artificial intelligence, but not all of them do. And so if there is a robot that is not artificially intelligent, it will just completely be programmed to do a certain set of tasks. And so there's less flexibility. There's not, you can't really make the robot do things that it's not programmed to do. So that's the one, drawback of robotics. The other thing is it's very expensive. It's robots right now are extremely expensive, and it's very difficult to justify sometimes to, buy a very expensive robot. Unless you have, like, Amazon had like a ridiculously huge warehouse. For them, it's justified perhaps to have, buy robots. But generally speaking, these are very expensive, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense for most companies right now. Eventually, when robots do come, they could help with the production planning, warehouse planning, inventory movements, and in general there'll be fewer labor requirements for companies. Again, this is something for on a high strategic level. Robotics may be extremely good once they're cheaper and you know used across the board. It may be very good for companies, but then again, a lot of people say, well, the world population is increasing. There's going to be a bigger workforce. What's going to happen when there are going to be fewer jobs? And so this is something that a lot of people are talking about regarding, robotics. And there's people who say that, look, it's, the one should not stop progress. So if robots do come in and there's less requirement in factories, well, maybe people can get new skills, and there'll be new opportunities out there for them for different jobs. So just because certain jobs are going to become redundant doesn't mean that new jobs will not be becoming available. But this is something that you do read about, and you do hear a lot of people discussing regarding robotics. All right, moving on now to the next trend. This one is a particularly interesting one. I find it very interesting. This is 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing. And let's start off with talking about what is 3D printing. Well, this is basically the process of making a physical object from a three-dimensional digital model, typically by laying down many thin layers of a material in succession. So interestingly, there we have a 3D machine in our university, and usually I like to take my students to show them, especially in this class, live 3D printing. And so what happens is that you take a file of exactly what you want made, and you put it into a computer, and that computer is linked to a machine. And this machine, it's sort of, this is one over here. I hope you can see it. It sort of has a nozzle, and what happens is the nozzle moves back and forth, and there are layers and layers of material that go, it just keeps going back and forth in a particular pattern. And so many thin layers are laid out, and at the end, the design that you had fed into the computer is actually made in a physical form. And that's what a 3D printer does. So this 3D printing has been becoming very, very popular. And initially, there were very few materials that could be made through 3D printing. But now there are many different methods that have been coming out, and there are many different types of 3D printing. And now 3D printing can be done for polymers, composites, metals, ceramics, sand molds, core, paper. So there's so many more things that can be made through 3D printing. And initially it was 3D printing was, being used to make like figurines, and just being used as like a hobby or to prototype different things. I had a friend who was in the jewelry business, and so when she was making and designing new designs, she went to a 3D printer and got those designs made in a 3D print, and asked her customers to sort of have a look at it and see how they felt. And if they were okay with it, only then would she go out and get it made in, real diamonds or gold or whatever. So this is an example of prototyping. So initially it was, just being used for prototyping, but now it's being used more and more for actual manufacturing. And so that's just something for you to keep in mind. There are nowadays actually big buildings and, houses that are being made or across the globe through 3D printing. So that should give you an idea of how advanced this has become. It is a $5.16 billion market and is growing. So this is a trend that, to definitely look out for. Is this something that's going to be, next year you're going to be seeing 3D printing across the globe? Probably not. It is still very expensive. It's still in the evolution stage. But, 5 to 10 years down the road, yes, you might start seeing certain companies buying 3D printers and beginning to use them. And what are the benefits? Well, number one, you can manufacture something, 24/7. So a 3D machine does not need to necessarily take a lot of breaks like a human being. So if it's a 3D printer making a house, that house could be made, 24 hours. That machine, 3D printer, could be making that house in order to complete it in a good time. You can also customize things. So that's a really great benefit of 3D printing. So if there is a design that a customer wants something specific made, it could be, let's say, a piece of clothing where they come in with a specific, design for clothing, and they input it into the machine. Well, it could be made specifically according to what the requirements the customer has. And so customization becomes easier. This, when it does happen, will have a significant impact on supply chains, because nowadays, we've been studying about global supply chains and how things are being sourced and manufactured all across the globe. But if you have pretty much, a 3D printer is like a factory in itself. And so if you have everything in, a 3D printer in your factory, you really do not need an extensive supply chain, a global supply chain all over the world. So we'll be seeing, once 3D printers become more common and cheaper, we'll be seeing supply chains evolve and change. And so, you'll see sourcing changing, manufacturing, production, all of these things changing. Something to keep in mind also is that the entire supply chain will become a lot shorter because everything will be being done pretty much in-house if you have a 3D printer. And so, yes, some certain supply chains will definitely become a lot less complex. Okay, so that takes care of, 3D printing. Now, next up, the next trend is augmented reality. This is, again, a pretty interesting new trend. And, I'm going to start off with talking about what is augmented reality. And so this is a technology that allows the integration of digital information with the user's environment in real time. And so what happens is you provide a view of a physical real world environment whose elements are augmented by computer generated or extracted real world sensory inputs such as sound, video, graphics, GPS data. So just to give you an example, you're, let's say, sitting at your computer and you want to go and have, you actually, so this is a real life example that I'm going to give you right now. So I just got a link a couple of days ago where one can go right now and have a virtual tour of, the best museums in the world. That is augmented reality. So it is not like I will actually be, so there are certain museums, let's say in Brazil, in London, in all over the world. And if I want to go and have a look at them, I can, just click on the link, go in, and there will be a virtual tour. So I'll be able to see everything. Now that's an example of more of a virtual reality kind of, actually an experiential kind of a situation. But sometimes, there is a situation, let's say that you want to sell something to somebody and they're sitting in a different part of the world and they cannot come to your store. So you can actually use augmented reality where you can show them your store and all of the different pieces in that store. And once they see everything in the store, they can make an informed decision of what they want to buy. So that's an example of augmented reality. Where you're using technology to really change the user's overall environment in real time. And through that, change, through that technology, they're going to be making, decisions. So when did this really start? This started in, 1990s. And the first, our augmented reality app was for iPhones in 2009. There are augmented smart glasses called the Google Glass smart lenses. Again, you wear them and you must have, you can, actually go on Google and look some of these new technologies up, and they're actually pretty fascinating. So, while you're walking and you have your glasses on, you can check various, emails, you can get all sorts of, augmented reality experiences. And so this is something that, it really changes the entire customer experience, and it really changes how we interact with computers. So if this actually happens through augmented reality in supply chain management, the picking process in warehouses can be made a lot more efficient. So, using these glasses, you can easily locate where things are more efficiently and figure out exactly what the best route is to go to pick things up in a warehouse. Because remember, warehouses are huge, and just navigating through them is, takes a lot of time, many places. It's also great for training staff. So you can have, these, let's say smart glasses or whatever, where different information can just sort of be given in real time to employees while they're working on, let's say, the factory floor. Also so net through augmented reality, the entire overall workflow, the transportation, a company's transportation and warehousing will be become a lot more efficient. It will be helping make these a lot more efficient. It will also help with delivery and load optimization. So, how much of load should be, in one area versus another. Things like that, augmented reality will help. And so this entire thing of this new trend of augmented reality has had societal and technological, it's changed society as we know it. So, the fact that you can, you know, sit at home and view, let's say, you're having a house made, and you can have a three-dimensional view of what it's going to look like, and your architect can continuously change it as per your requirement. And once it's as per your requirement, you can go ahead and say, okay, sure, I'm going to go for this. So these are, new ways of doing things. It could be, you're in the market to buy furniture, you can actually, have a look at it, and have maybe a model put in your home, and then decide how it will look based on its dimensions, and then decide whether or not you want to buy it. Now, these are, big changes in the way business is being done. And so this has really changed the way society operates to a large extent. So that's the augmented reality trend for you right there. Okay, moving on, mobile computing. This is something I think it's very much happening as we know it right now. And what this basically means, it's technology that allows for transmission of data, voice, and video via a computer or any other wireless enabled device without having to be connected to a fixed physical link. So this is basically, when you have a wireless connection on your phone, and you can use your phone to buy things, you can use your phone to have video conferences, exchange pictures. You're in a store, you don't know if you have two options. You can easily snap photos, send them to your, a family member, a friend, to get advice. There's so many things you can do through mobile computing that were never possible before. Now, there's big shifts in mobile data. So mobile data traffic has actually grown 18 times over the last 5 years. It's a huge growth. There are 8 billion mobile devices currently in use, and the average smartphone usage has grown 38%. So net, there's a lot of 8 billion mobile devices in the world, and they're smartphones, so they're like practically mini computers, and you can do a lot of business through mobile phones. And also what's happened is that the entire online shopping behavior has changed because of smartphones and laptops and tablets. I mean, you really don't need to go to a store now to buy anything. Most stores have an online presence, and so if you really want to buy something, you can just click a button, and if you have money in your bank, it's yours. So what exactly? Let's have a look at how does this impact supply chains? And so if you think about it, this is already here. This is not something that's going to be happening in the future. This is a trend that's definitely here. And so one of the things that is happening because of mobile computing is that there's something called omni channels that is becoming a lot more common. And what omni channels means is that there are many channels through which a customer can buy a particular good. So through their phone, laptop, all of these things. And also there are many ways for companies to reach a customer to sort of lure them to buy their product. So there's so many ways. You have Instagram and Facebook and all kinds of Google, all of these different ways, and those can be, those function on laptops and your phone, mobile phones, and all that. So you'll see that there's this two-way communication going on, and so it's called omni channels because there's so many various channels where companies and customers can now communicate. So in effect, supply chains have changed quite radically because of this omni-channel culture. This has also transformed the whole retail shopping industry and the whole retail shopping experience. Now companies invest heavily in making very good websites because that has a very big impact on whether or not, people actually want to buy a product. So, photographs, for example, of products, there are photo shoots that are done for products with excellent lighting and having, professional photographers come in because it's just the retail experience has changed and this was never done in the past. But now those pictures can determine whether, and that are posted on the website can determine whether or not a customer actually wants to buy a product. And many times nowadays, people actually look at the product online first before going in and buying the product. So another thing is that because there's so much information on, basically on whether it's on your phone or overall, there's so many times the websites that are being hosted by companies are very large, and so there's a shift to using clouds. So a lot of information is now not necessarily being saved on the company's server, but they're being saved on clouds. And I will be having another lecture that I'll be giving to you specifically about clouds. But for now, I think this is enough for you to know. And so generally before everything was very structured and centralized, and now because of, this whole mobile computing, operations have decentralized for a lot of processes. Because of mobile computing, demand planning, inventory management, transportation, warehousing, all of these have changed. So the reason they've changed is that if people are buying, online, you can't treat them like the same customer who's coming into a store. Usually there is a separate warehouse for e-commerce goods as compared to retail outlets. There's a different distribution strategy. Your demand, your projections are different. So you have to hold separate inventory for your e-commerce business and separate inventory for your retail business. And so, there's just the entire strategy and the operations of physical versus selling through mobile computing, very, very different. Okay. Excuse me. Another trend that is up and coming is uh, crowdsourcing. And this is something that is, in Pakistan, we don't really hear a lot about it. It's there, but it's not being used in a big way. So let's just look at what exactly crowdsourcing is. This is a specific sourcing model in which individuals or organizations use contributions from internet users to obtain needed service or ideas. So an example of this is, I had a friend and she was, trying to raise money for a nonprofit. And so she did crowdsourcing. Or, there's another example where, there was somebody who had a ill family member, couldn't really afford all the medication. And so they went on, decided to crowdsourcing, or somebody decides to do a new business and they need seed capital. And so what crowdsourcing is, basically there are websites that you can go to and you can set up exactly that. Say I want to launch a new business, I would set up exactly what my business is going to be, what it's like. I would say, okay, I already have raised X amount of money, but in order for me to launch my business, I need this much more. And then I would go post it on my crowdsourcing site, and then I would add in, let's say, friends and family, and I would shoot it out, and basically people who know me, or people who find out about this business, can donate some money. And so this is something that has picked up quite a bit globally. And yeah, so here, the thing is that it's basically a great way to match supply, resources, and demand. And so, for example, if there's a demand for something, you can match it with suppliers. It's just, it makes it, once you post a requirement online and you spread the word, it's easier to find to find the right matches. And so this is just a very different way of doing business, and um, it's not going to have a very significant impact on supply chain management, but it's just something good to know that's a new and evolving trend. Okay, next up is the trend of delivery drones. And, here you can see, we've all seen drones, because we see them in dharnas and in weddings now and, all over the place. But here's an example of a drone in this particular slide, where there's a delivery of food, and this delivery is happening in the mountains of Portugal. And so this is an example of a basically what a delivery drone is an unmanned aircraft that can navigate autonomously without direct human control or is guided remotely. So a drone can just it's you see certain drones that with like a remote control, but there are others that do not require remote control. You just program where exactly they have to go and it's done. These were initially were used in military operations in the year 2000, and now they're becoming more and more in use commercially. They are being used for agriculture, just to check uh, how things are. So you don't necessarily have to walk the entire area, your agricultural lands. You can send in a drone and just to sort of observe how things are. They're also being used a lot for disaster management. So if somebody is stuck in a very dangerous place and they need food supplies and humans can't necessarily easily go in a very dangerous area, they can actually send in medical supplies, or they can send in food using drones. It's used for search and rescue operations, geographic mapping, so lots of different ways. And the big thing is that there's a lot of questions about whether or not delivery drones can be used more by logistics companies. Um, and so, on the slide, you can read this yourself. It's a rather large market size right now for drones. We're talking about a market size of 550 million in 2004, and it's expected that it's about $1 billion or so now. But the thing is that it's still not being used in logistics very commonly because of rules and regulations. So it's very it's sort of like, how do you manage drone traffic? I mean, let's say logistics companies start, let's say there are 5 logistics companies in Karachi, and they all start using drone delivery for delivering various goods that are small in size. Well, how do you really, you can't sort of have a drone just pop out of nowhere. There's a security or it's a traffic hazard, right? So that's something where, there's still countries are trying to figure out how this would logistically work. That being said, if there is something that needs something really small but valuable that needs to be sent to a remote location quickly, drones can be used. They do provide ultra-fast replenishments for high-end items. And so, there are certain benefits, but the world still hasn't really figured out how these can be used, for external deliveries. Internally, within companies, drones can definitely be used in warehouses just to check items. They can be used, instead of having like guards, you can have drones with video cameras checking across the whole night to make sure that everything is in place. So there are it is being used in supply chain management, but more within factories versus externally for deliveries. The next new trend is in supply chain management is blockchain. And blockchain is something that there's been a lot of interest in it. For the sake of this course, you do not need to know it really in depth, but I do want to give a basic understanding of what it is. So I'm going to read out the definition and I'll try and explain it to you as well. So what blockchain is a protocol for decentralized and distributed digital ledger used to record transactions across many computers. This technology enables proof of ownership and transfer of ownership from one entity to another without using a trusted third-party intermediary. And so let me just give you an example of this. And Bitcoins, and so all of this whole blockchain, one of the probably places where it's forecasted that it's going to be being used a lot is in finance. And so you have to make a transaction between two parties, what always happens is that it has to usually go through the bank. But when blockchain was introduced, blockchain, just imagine it to be like a big, distributed digital ledger. Just imagine it to be sort of like a huge spreadsheets of sorts. And so everybody has, a coded sort of a code. So let's say I want to have a transaction with party X. So I can use blockchain in the future, perhaps, versus going through a bank. And so the benefit would be that me and party X would decide, okay, we'll use the blockchain. And the benefit will be that we can do the transaction fast. We do not need to really use a bank. And so we go in and we put in the information in the distributed digital ledger saying that, okay, Farad is going to be giving X good, and there'll be a money transfer of X amount on this day and this time. And so this is, will allow a transparency between both of the parties. They will get access to the information that they need to make that transaction, and it eliminates the third party and it makes it a lot easier. And so this is something that started in 2008 with the introduction of Bitcoins. Eventually then people started thinking about making smart contracts, and using, this whole idea of blockchain really caught up. So if you guys really want to know a little bit more about how blockchain works and the details of it, this you can go through, spend a little bit of time to understand, exactly how blockchain works, and get a more in-depth understanding. Now, what are the impacts of blockchain? Well, there's several impacts. There is, number one, reduced transaction costs. If I'm eliminating the bank out of making a transaction, well, I'm going to be saving transaction costs. It's just going to be between me and the other party. It's time saving. It's quick. It's efficient. Both parties do not, again, have to go through the bank. So it definitely saves time. It's an immediate transaction between parties. It increases the supply chain visibility, and smart contracts are introduced. So previously, where the contract is going through the bank and all of that, now you can just sort of have online smart contracts between these two parties, quickly have the transaction executed. And so this is something that again is changing how transactions are happening. Is this something that's very prevalent right now? No. But can it really grow in the next 10 years, 15 years? Yes, this is a trend that, it has a lot of people really who believe in it and who think that eventually this will take over a lot of the functionality that is currently happening in banks. The next new trend is Omni channels, and I discussed this earlier in the lecture. And this is basically, you are engaging customers through every channel available. So you're making sure that a customer is, you're sending your ads through as many ways as possible. So and you are contacting customers, and you're also allowing customers to make purchases through many different ways. They can come to your store to make a purchase. They can make a purchase using, a website on their phone, from their laptop, all different places, as many channels as you possibly can. you sort of creating as many channels as you possibly can with your consumer. And so, definitely smartphones and tablets are what's really driving all of this, because people are using, their smartphones more. We just saw that, the general number of phones is increasing and the usage is also increasing. And so this has really helped, you know, increase the whole omni-channel trend. Now let's just, one thing to also consider is you can have all these different channels. You can be, sort of bombarding your customer, and your customer can also be making a lot more purchases through all these various channels. But the thing is, you have to manage the supply chain distribution, through all these channels. So so you're giving all, basically the point is that you're giving a lot of different options to your customers. For example, people can buy online, they can purchase something, and they can choose to pick it up in the actual store, right? That's one option. People can buy online, right? And then they can ask for drop shipping, which basically means, okay, they're buying online, they're going to pay the company to have it shipped to their home. So that's another option. They can purchase it in the store and say, okay, this is a third option. They can buy something in the store and say, look, we're buying this maybe piece of furniture, but can you have it actually delivered to our house? So that's the third option. Same day on demand delivery, this is a fourth option. You ship it, from one physical store to another store. Maybe there's something that people really want to pick up from one store, it's not available there, so you'll have it shipped from one store to another. Drop shipping is when you transfer products from the warehouse to another place, so this is just shipping to a customer. And also there's another thing of, you buy online but then you return it in the store. You buy something, you thought that it looked really great on the website, but you realize it wasn't really what you want. So now you can notice that there's so many different options that you're giving the customer. There are options to return goods. There are options for them to pick it up at the store. There's just so many different options, and you have to manage all of this. So this definitely has increased the complexity of supply chains. Now, for example, if you're selling, and I mentioned this earlier in the lecture as well, for e-commerce goods, you cannot use the same warehouse as the one that you're using for your retail stores. Usually, for e-commerce, there's a separate warehouse that's called a fulfillment center. So your warehousing has to be different. The amount of inventory that you're keeping in your warehouse has to be different, because maybe online sales are going to be, usually they are different from your retail stores sales. So you're having to manage all of these various warehousing, demand forecasting. Everything has to be separated. And then also you have to make sure that the logistics part of delivery, of pickup, all of these are managed in the best way possible. There are certain times where where some companies can make pickup points. So rather, it's sort of, again, this is just another option in addition to all the other options I gave for distribution. But, pickup points are basically, various points where the goods will be placed for customers to pick it up. So this is just another distribution omni-channel strategy. But the point is that, omni-channels has definitely increased the complexity of supply chain management. So this is a trend that is definitely here already, and it is one that is, a very interesting one, and there's a lot of research being done on this. All right, the next one, the next trend, and I'm actually going to quickly add a title here of big data, which is missing. But the next trend is big data. And this is something that is just huge. This big data is, out of all the various, trends that I have spoken about, this trend has come in with a bang. And what big data basically means is that with all of these, smart objects, and with all of the, internet and, omni channels, and with being able to all these different social networking sites, what's happening is that companies are being able to collect a lot of information regarding their consumers. When the consumers are buying goods, what they're buying, what their choices are, you know, and through the information, through this huge amount of information that is being extracted from customers, there's a lot of analysis that is done on that data, and through that analysis there are a lot of predictions that can be made, that companies make, about what is going to happen in the future, and then they this provide basically helps them make predictions. And so I'm also going to just read out a little bit about what's written in these slides because it's important for you. But I wanted to give you a quick introduction before I actually read out the details of what's written on the slide. So for big data overall, what it is advanced data analytics methods that extract value from data. Again, this is exactly what I said. You extract a lot of data from the customer, but then from that data, you take out information, you analyze the data, and you take out important information out of it. So big data also provides more data accuracy, clarity, insights, leading to important intelligence information that can be shared across supply chains. So the information that is extracted through big data can be shared across the supply chain, and there are a lot of benefits. So let's just talk about some of the benefits. There's definitely, if you have more data and you can do analytics on it, and the analytics that's being done, just mind you, it's because there's so much of information. There are a lot of computer programs that are being used to help sift through this big data, such as Python. There are a lot of algorithms also that are being used to sort of model the data and to figure out, make the future predictions. But net, this is being used a lot by many companies, and the information that is being extracted is information that can help companies do better demand planning, make better distribution strategies. In general, the information is also helping companies use pull strategies rather than push. And so all of you should be very familiar with this by now. In case you're not, I'll just quickly give you a quick sort of high level differentiation between push and pull. So pull is basically you get an order and then you start making goods. And push is basically you make a lot of goods and you just kind of push it out to the consumers. So companies generally like to use a mixed strategy, but they like to use more of the pull strategy because there's less wastage. You get an order and then you make whatever has to be made. So with big data, the companies can use a more of pull strategy rather than push, because they can get a quick understanding of and predict exactly when customers will be placing orders. Companies can also get more feedback from customers through big data because there's just so much information coming in. You can figure out through big data what are things that customers are liking, what are trends that customers are, appeal to customers. And through that information, you can then change your product offering or your service offering to your customers and really hone it into exactly what the customer wants. Information in general through big data can be shared across the supply chain. And so the better decisions can be made because you now have more information on hand across the supply chain. And so more information, better quality information, and with that, you can then make fast decisions. Big data and advanced analytics, they are also being used for optimization tools, demand forecasting, and risk analytics. So net, it's basically, again, what this point is saying is it's basically helping you with better decision making. It's a repeat of the fourth point, but it goes into more details. And so it will basically help you identify exactly what you should be doing. What is the optimal decisions that you should be making in your company? Another thing that big data is doing is basically helping with geoanalytics. And so I'm just going to skip over to this slide. And here you can see this is, effectively how distribution channels are being determined. And so you can plot things out. You can have, a lot more information. This is, called geoanalytics. And through this information, by looking at it, you can establish exactly what your distribution strategy could be. Again, there's a lot of software, computer software. Once you have this data, you can use that software and then make very smart decisions as far as your distribution strategy goes. On this slide, I'm just skipping back one slide. This slide basically talks about how through big data, about 80% of companies have improved their decision making. And the kinds of, this just gives you a whole lot of examples about what kind of decision making has improved across the board. So, it mentions that efficiency of resolving customer issues has improved. There's reduced cost of healthcare. People could predict customers' preferences beforehand. And so you can basically send information out to customers as well, because, through big data, you'll know exactly, what your customer is interested in. And so you would be able to customize your advertising to customers based on their particular buying behavior. And additionally, overall customer service can also improve. You know exactly what your customer wants and you can give it to them. So big data is having an impact on how organizations react to supply chain issues. If there is a problem in the supply chain, through big data, you can figure the problem out. And this overall has improved supply chain efficiency, and there's more integration across supply chain. So again, if there are certain problems happening within your supply chain, you've got a plethora of data. You can, by doing some quick analytics, you should be able to figure it out and resolve the issue a lot faster. What's also happening as a result of big data is that there's an improvement in or reduction, sorry, in the overall cycle time. And so things are being able to be manufactured quicker, and there's overall more supply chain efficiency across the board. Here on this slide, just for your information, this is gives you more details about all the different benefits big data has had to different companies. Another big advantage of having big data is that there's more knowledge in companies of how supply chain tactics, strategies, and operations are influencing financial objectives. So, you can see through supply chain, big data analytics, how your decisions are impacting the bottom line, your financial performance. And so that's very valuable information. And so once you can figure that out, that relationship, you can also see how changing different variables could improve your profitability. So that's another thing that is resulting as, from big data analytics. Through big data analytics, there's a couple more advantages. Traceability and recalls become easier. There's an increased supplier quality from supplier audit to inbound inspection and final assembly with the big data. So again, dealing with your suppliers, this is something that has a humongous impact on your end result. And so previously, and I've mentioned this in some of my other lectures as well, but suppliers were seen as an anti-party, but nowadays it's a very different way of working where suppliers are seen are seen as partners. And so that there's a better relationship. And through big data though, you can basically keep a good tab on what's going on with your supplier. Are there any issues that maybe you're noticing certain problems perhaps. Through big data analytics you can predict problems, and you can see before the actual situation or some event happens. You can sort of see a downward trend and reach out maybe to your supplier and say, look, there seems to be certain problems going on. Is everything okay? And so you can resolve problems before they actually happen. There's also a lot of long-term change management in organizations that's instigated through big data. So if you're planning to make a huge investment, you're not sure whether the investment should be made or not. Well, the best way to determine that is through making an informed decision. And so basically by virtue of looking at data of the past and doing analytics, you can actually make a much more informed decision about making long-term investment decisions. So both for the short term and the long run, big data is very important for companies. This is also an area, there's a lot of requirement for big data and people with big data analytics profiles. And so there's a lot of demand in the market for data scientists right now. And so there are a lot of jobs in this particular area. And this is, one job area that a lot of people are specializing in, because companies need this, and they will be needing this more and more going forward, because information is power. And companies that are able to extract valuable information definitely have an edge over their competitors. If you can understand your customer, if you can give the customer what they want, you're definitely ahead of your competitors. Also within your organization, if you can identify problems before they actually happen, and you have a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, that's just a huge win. And being able to sort of see how your decisions impact your bottom line and your finances, again, a humongous win. So with that, I'm going to conclude this lecture, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot about some new trends, and I hope you found it really interesting. I definitely did. So with that, I'm bringing this lecture to an end, and I will speak to you with another topic on supply chain management soon. Thank you very much.